Hi, folks. Welcome to Film Optimist, where we talk about all things film with a hefty dose of optimism. I'm your co-host, Seth Boyd,
I am Megan Tierney Flores.
and we are welcomed once again by the illustrious Riley Gerberick. Riley, say hi and tell us what we're watching and why.
It's me. Okay,
Yes.
so we are going to be talking about the better of the Star Trek Next Gen movies, Star Trek Nemesis. We're
Mm,
watching this because Seth and I were, I think we were at a bar when you were out visiting, and we were randomly
hmm
talking about Star Trek. And I mentioned how First Contact is a steaming pile of garbage, and everyone who likes First Contact is bad, and Nemesis is just a better film, which is a very unpopular opinion, but it's the correct opinion.
I'm glad you prefaced it that way. I don't think this is probably the first episode where we've had with a guest with a scorching hot take like this. And I'm gonna say I had not seen it before, and because I had heard this take, I thought it was just a known fact of don't bother with that one. So I was shocked that you not just liked it, but preferred it to a movie
Mm.
that a lot of Star Trek heads consider to be good, and like not just Star Trek heads, but critics. Like Roger Ebert liked First Contact more than any of the ones starring the original crew.
Mm.
Just for context for non-Star Trek folks, on the note of non-Star Trek folks, Megan, this was your first literal encounter, I think, our first full length piece of Star Trek media. Is that correct?
That's correct, Seth. Yeah, non-Star Trek
Baptism
folk
by
is a really
fire.
good is a really good like acronym or name for me basically. That's me, but I know that we're amongst Star Trek fans, so I'm really excited
hmm
to hear your guys' take on it. But I that being said, I should like maybe step back a little bit as I normally do,
Sure.
but I'm excited to hear your guys' takes.
I'm also gonna be curious to hear your take on someone like because one of the things I'm wondering about is how well does the movie work if you don't know anything about Star Trek. Um,
Yeah.
so you are our kind of control for that because we'll probably talk a little bit about how the movie was made, etc. But my very limited understanding, because I didn't do too much research here, is the director of this movie hadn't actually watched any episodes of Next Generation, was more kind of a Hollywood director, and I think there was a little bit of a push of we need to make this movie more accessible to some degree. So did that
Okay.
work? Is a
Mm.
question. But right, jump in, dive in. What is it specifically that you think this one does so much better than the next gen?
Yeah. So for kind of like a primer for a little bit of Megan at this point, but I'm sure she's caught on and more like non-Star Trek fans. Star Trek is a very like progressive property. It is meant to be very, very political. It is meant to be a like speculative, like what if humanity like evolved past all these like, bad practices and horrible traits and like we live in a post-scarcity, post-money, like post-capitalist society. Everyone's like does things because they want to and not because they have to. Money doesn't exist, and the whole point of Starfleet, the like central like group, the protagonists, is just explore the galaxy, interact with interesting like races and people, and like just be good to other living creatures and stuff, right? Um, and this started in like the 60s. The series has had a history of like a lot of like groundbreaking progressive like moments in TV and film and stuff, like the first interracial romance on TV in the 60s, right? It had it's got a lot of in like the 80s talking about, like trans rights and stuff before that's even like a conversation, right? A lot of that. And the newer films, the reboots by JJ, are universally like reviled because it's just kind of like diminished to like an action film, which I can completely
Yeah.
understand. Um, the reason why I like Nemesis so much is because Nemesis kind of creates this um, creates this bridge between a more modern audience while still keeping with what I feel is the like speculative like fiction of the series, right? You've got it is like a lot more, I guess, action oriented, but the core of it is
Mm.
still a central like, hey, what if a benevolent, usually like noble, upstanding person was born in a very like harsh fascist society, bred for war? Like, what would you look like? And we have that in Patrick Stewart's character, Jean-Luc Picard, who is like an incredibly noble, like honored and universally beloved and respected character in the franchise. And you have his foil, where it's a clone of him played by Tom Hardy. We only talk about Tom Hardy movies when I'm on because Tom Hardy's the
Right,
very
of
best.
course.
Yeah. But who is cloned, like raised in secret to like kill Picard and kind of replace him. Um, we'll get more into his like backstory and stuff. But it's a, you know, the central thing is like, hey, what if you were born somewhere else, right? What if you were born in a like incredibly harsh, evil, like manipulative society? Kind of that nature versus nurture like talk. Whereas First Contact is, in my opinion, just fetishized by the like Star Trek community of like, oh, it's the most important like moment in the entire history of Star Trek. Meanwhile, the rest of the film is, you've got tonal whiplash to the point where you're basically watching 2 to 3 different films at the same time. They completely take the like the main premise of the antagonist in Next Gen and in First Contact is the Borg. They're this mechanical hive mind that assimilate other people into becoming like them. And once you're a part of the Borg, congratulations, you're now part of the Borg. We're going to assimilate the rest of the universe, right? They're meant to be a hive mind. They're meant to be like, there is no individuality. You get rid of one, you get rid of all of them. And they take that concept, throw it out the window, give them a Borg mommy who just wants to fuck Data, and make it
Yeah.
really like it's they take the Borg and they make it not the Borg. They completely
Right.
throw away the entire premise of the like faction
I
of the
need to just
species.
step in here real quick and say Riley is not over exaggerating. That what happens. That's what
Oh.
happens. Like
Yeah,
the Borg queen wants to fuck Data, and you get into some territories you expect you only get with some manga or um
Whoa.
yeah, it's a
but
lot of
it's
like,
Star Trek.
yeah, it's a lot of like body horror
Yeah.
and like which is part of the Borg, but like Data is a synthetic android who's like in his whole Seth and I adore this character. We tried to write
Yes.
like a short story based on Data in like the modern world. But like, you know, a machine learning to be human, right? A machine learning what it means to be human. And in the film, like the Borg Queen, which is antithetical to the Borg, as I already said, is like trying to get Data to like, hey Data, do you want some skin? Do you want flesh to like, you know, feel this like you want to bang? And it's I just think it's trash. Meanwhile, you have all this, which is supposed to be like the Borg are trying to basically like undo humanity's like progression and stop them from creating faster than light travel, which would stop them from, you know, joining the Federation, which would stop them from exploring the galaxy and basically like reduce them to apes, right? Um, they're trying to go back in time and stop them from doing that. And you smash cut to the rest of the crew just kind of fucking around with some moonshiner building a rocket in what feels like a sitcom. And it like the film clashes with itself, is against what has already established. And last thing I'm going to point out, there's a character named Geordie LaForge who has a whole character arc, you know, played by uh,
LeVar
uh,
Burton.
I'm blanking on his name, Burton.
LeVar Burton, right?
LeVar Burton, yes, thank you. Played by LeVar Burton, who has like a visor to see because he's, you know, visually impaired. Like can't see, like I think he's blind, but the visor gives him like infrared vision or something like that. enhanced. But there's a whole like storyline in the show where they're like, "Hey, Jordy, do you want us to like fix your eyes?" He's like, "No, my eyes are fine. Like this is how I see. Like I don't. There's nothing wrong with me." First Contact fixes his eyes and gives him magical robot eyes, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, cool,
Hmm.
guys. That's again, I feel like whoever wrote First Contact, and Seth probably has this info, and it's probably a guy who worked on the show, but like
It's very likely, yeah.
they just
Mm.
they just forgot everything that they had set up in Next Gen, and to me, it doesn't feel like Next Gen at all. That's my 10-minute rant on why First Contact sucks, and now we'll talk about Nemesis.
I think I have to respond to a few things. Firstly, nothing you said is incorrect. I just want to make sure that's clear. But like among just for cultural context, I do really like the original series movies. They're very campy, but they're fun. I'm talking about like William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I do remember very clearly when First Contact came out. I should say I don't remember like I was like 4 when it came out, but like the reviews that came out contemporary were, oh my God, we have Patrick Stewart. We have a real actor in a Star Trek thing. And Patrick Stewart is great, but I do think there's been this kind of weird thing of, because he is a Shakespearean trained actor with such a presence, of critics kind of worshiping some of the next gen stuff because of the gravitas he single-handedly brought it. That's not to diminish
Yeah.
everybody else, but like that was literally Roger Ebert's review was, we finally have real acting in a Star Trek movie with Patrick Stewart. It's like, I can't say fuck you because like Leonard Nimoy is great. I love a lot of my original crew, and it's such a like
Yeah.
single focus thing. So I do think that was kind of the non-Star Trek friend critical response was like, oh, well, this is kind of better. And there's also like if I remember right, there's a long throughout the entire movie Moby Dick metaphor that is very heavy-handed. And also, I don't know if he had done at the time, but Patrick Stewart did later play Ahab in an adaptation. I think so. That's also kind of like, yeah, we know he can do this character. So, um,
I think
so
like
Megan,
to
you go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, kind of like build off that. I think that they do. It is kind of like a, oh well, Patrick Stewart's in a Star Trek film. It's the
Mm,
best, right? It's got to
right.
be good,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And Patrick Stewart is phenomenal. There's a
Mhm.
lot of like episodes of Next Gen where they're like, hey Patrick, do you want to act? And he's like, oh, I would love to act, and he can really show off his chops. But like
Yeah.
the dude's got range. Like
Mhm.
the Picard character is not just this like
Mhm.
ultra serious like
Mhm.
um Shakespearean type character,
Mhm.
like, I think they expect Patrick Stewart to play. Like Picard is a fucking goofball who does things
Yes.
because he thinks it's funny, right? Um, and I think that, unfortunately, I think like Nemesis has this a little bit too, but I think they just kind of like throw him into these somewhat like deadpan survival of the human race like plot
Sure.
lines. Um, but yeah, like Patrick Stewart will make anything that he's in watchable, but I think the
Yeah.
rest of it just like falls apart.
Yeah. Um, I think you're absolutely right. I think to the point of him being goofy, that comes out a lot more in this movie than I expected. He's having a lot of fun giving the toast, and there's a lot of shenanigans in the first like 20, 30 minutes of this movie that you kind of picks up again later, but it felt a lot more fun than I expected to be. And um maybe we're gonna address how you thought about all this in a second, but the kind of
Mhm.
self-deprecating joke of Star Trek fans is we don't like it when things are happening. There should be like 6 big board meetings a minimum per episode. There should be a lot of talk and like no
Okay,
action
good.
scenes. Whereas the J.J. Abrams movies are almost all action scenes. So I was
Yeah.
surprised how much I liked the action scenes in this movie. So I fully agree with you, Riley, it being like that gap. I thought they were
Yeah.
way better than I expected. So Megan, what did you think? How did this compare to
The
what you thought Star Trek was? How'd you like the movie individually, etc.?
the puzzle pieces are really making sense, guys.
I
Well,
figured we need to get some of this context before you answer.
and it's funny because I think, well, even just to start, like I think that I can maybe speak to like Star Trek stereotypes that I came into it
Sure.
with, which you guys have like put down and like that I'm picking up on too.
All
That
the
I
techno babble.
the word that came to mind for me is like sophisticated. This is trying to be like a very sophisticated elite, like political entity. Seth and I are coming off of, we just talked about like Star Wars and
Yeah.
the original Star Wars, and so using comparison there, but and I was thinking about it
Riley
like
just
for
pointed
me.
to his Star Wars poster for the audience at home.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there's another one
Yeah.
behind the camera.
I mean, these are the two like head honchos. I feel like for our generation of
absolutely. Yeah.
of an entity like this, and probably and how influential it was and stuff. But I was recognizing, like, I think Star Wars. We were the whole episode basically that Seth and I talk about is that Star Wars is, of course, very political, but this one is very like the sophistication level of politicalness in Star Trek is very like very front and center. I think Star Wars is a little bit more of like a song and dance about, especially the newer ones, J.J. Abrams versions and stuff like that. It's just kind of tiptoeing on sprinkling some stuff in there that like, ooh, maybe it's getting political kind of thing, but this one is very like pointedly about like racism and like like we were talking about like nature versus nurture stuff. So that was a part of it, but yeah, coming into it, I think especially just as a kid, the jargon of space space
like
space
most of
life.
it's made up too. Like
Yes.
tachyon particles are a made up fucking thing.
Mhm.
Like temporal, like microns or some shit. You know,
Nice.
like they love to make up scientific terms to like make it sound very technical. And yeah,
This
It
is not
does.
hard sci-fi. Yeah.
the way like I think like as the two like preeminent like sci-fi properties, like Star Wars is like science fantasy, right?
Yeah.
It does have a lot of like politics in there that Lucas threw in, but in a like in a very like paralleled
Yeah.
existence, right? With like, you know, Vietnam and stuff like that.
Yes. That's
Star
what we were
Trek
talking
is
about.
like take what we have now and just throw it into the future, and how are we dealing with the shit that we currently have, right? We could go
Thinking
on
about it
for
as the what if of our society is a helpful a helpful way to think about it. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was peak also like early 2000s. I think it looks great. Like honestly,
It looked really good. It looked a
looked
lot better than I
really fucking
expected.
good.
I mean, this was like still shot on film, I presume, because
It looked great.
there's barely been anything shot on digital yet. So that I think that's
Yeah.
part of it.
I had like made a comment when we were watching it. I'm like the Remans, like their costume design feels
Oh yeah.
fucking sweet. Like
Yeah.
the
No, all of
sleek,
it.
like shiny purple, like
Mm-hmm.
almost bulbous, like in areas,
Yeah.
like suits. I'm like, that's the sci-fi like itch, right? That's the feeling that
Literally.
I see it, and I'm like, that's some fucking alien shit right there, man. I love it.
Right.
Literally. Mm-hmm. No,
I was gonna say,
everything.
Megan, I know you love your aliens. That was like your
Yes.
disappointment in Nope. Was it a long time till we get the alien? It's just the one alien. So you have a lot of
Yeah.
fucking aliens in this movie. How did you feel getting your aliens?
Loved it. Yeah, makeup. I thought makeup was amazing. Like very, very good. Makeup going on, and it looked. I think my sweet spot is like nothing beats Halloween Town, but
Oh,
like
sure.
characters, and they maybe even beat that. They looked great. They looked really, really
They're
good.
absolute creatures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun part about it for me. So
Yeah.
I liked that aspect.
I'm so glad to hear that, because that is definitely part of the fun of Star Trek, of all the different worlds, the different characters, and you get a lot more variety of worlds in Star Trek just by nature of being mostly a TV show. Like there's so many planets and races that are in one episode that never come back again, and obviously in the show, just for budget, often it's a human with some differently shaped ears, pretty often, or some different color makeup, whatever.
Or
But
like they
often
got
it's
a weird
not.
forehead thing, or
Right,
like a weird
exactly.
nose thing. Yeah.
But especially like these group shots you have in places like the wedding, you have like 30 or 40 completely different species. And I just love seeing a group shot like that. That like, I bet this movie was really fun to work on for the effects team. you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think they all have worked out a lot better than expected. And like you said about the costume, yeah, it just looks so classic sci-fi to me. I fully agree with you, Riley.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nemesis, like as far as like the cast dynamics, to me,
Mhm.
like especially at the beginning, it feels like a natural continuation of the show. Like,
Mhm.
you have Riker and Deanna getting married, and it's like, okay, cool, that makes sense. You have like a because I think this movie does like finish the next gen like timeline to a
Yeah,
certain extent.
they were
Mm.
potentially going to do a sequel, and then this movie didn't do well enough for that to happen. So this was the last official canonical next gen
Well,
thing.
yeah. But yeah, like, it showcases like I think the cast dynamics and the relationships and stuff well. I think the other reason why I like this more is because it knows its scope to a certain extent.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, like yes, it ends in a very like dramatic, like, series changing event.
Hmm.
But it's also like it could just be an episode to a certain extent. Like
Yeah.
this could
Mm-hmm.
just be a next gen like two-parter for 90% of the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um it doesn't go it doesn't try to like, do anything beyond it. I said it knows the scope. That's kind of where I am on
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think especially compared to like First Contact, you do have like three, maybe even more simultaneous things going on in a way that doesn't quite work, and it's
it
very
just doesn't
exhausting. I mean, like a
gel.
lot of movies do that, but just it was exhausting. And like, no, these are interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I had used like tonal whiplash as the example like earlier,
yeah.
and I can't emphasize that like more or enough.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Nemesis. I rewatched it and I like got out my notes and I was like starting to write stuff down,
It's-
and I didn't write down anything. It doesn't like do anything crazy. It doesn't do anything
Yeah.
groundbreaking. I feel for like a Star Trek film. I feel like it's a very standard thing, but I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that. I like it's still
Mhm.
fun. It still all
Mm-hmm.
like makes sense. Nothing in there makes you go like, well, that wouldn't happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, it knows what it's doing. It knows its characters and writes them in a logical manner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, but
Maybe
yeah, it's like
who was your favorite? Sorry, you got it right.
no. You
Mm-hmm.
Who did who's a standout character? Because like I was assuming you maybe have heard of Picard, but maybe not the others. Like who kind of stood out to you as a performance or a character?
Yeah. You mean of like the main? Because in this one, I did like Tom Hardy's character,
Yeah.
of course.
yeah.
Yeah, Tom Hardy's great in this. Yeah.
But of the main cat, I did like Data. I thought it was kind of strange. Like I thought they were setting it up to be like it was gonna be a hate on Android like type of
Oh,
movie
sure.
because like they'll really like pull some shit on Data there, and so I thought it was gonna be kind of like the something about that basically.
Like being
But
racist against androids or
literally,
something, or
yeah, the Android
yeah,
versus like
Yeah.
bio
right.
storyline, I guess. But because there was it's something about it too is like to me there was a level of kind of like a degree of separation that is going on where it's very pointed. Like I think like again, sorry to go back to keep going back to Star Wars, but like
That's okay.
everything is like it felt as though Star Wars was trying to be like, yes, everything is like nicely integrated. Like, look at all these,
Mm,
everything getting along so well together. And I thought that I had a feeling like even that kind of knowing that Star Trek is a little bit like a little more pointedly political or just like kind of
mhm.
kind of like
Yeah.
segregated in whatever word like
One of the
derivative of that word means.
one of the series takes place on a former work camp.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
entirety of it. And like
R-
DS9 takes place on a station that used to be basically like an occupied work camp in a like, evil empire like enslaved the natives and threw
Yeah.
them in the mines, right? Like
It's good to know.
it doesn't hide anything. It throws it in your face.
Yeah. I
Um
know what like I was going into it basically thinking like, oh, it's gonna be they're setting it up for something like that. And in a
Yep.
way I guess it does. I mean, I guess it's like the clone mentality versus the bio or the the original like
Yeah.
aspect. So in a way it does, but I was trying to pinpoint like what they were saying about that specifically.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
glad you picked out Data because
yeah,
the film does rely a little heavily on like Picard and Data, but ultimately it is about them, right? You've
right.
got the relationship with uh Picard and Tom Hardy, who they're the same person biologically, right? And
Yeah.
you've got a cool one was created to do a thing, and one was born and allowed to do whatever it wanted, right? And the
Hmm.
same, like you get that parallel with Data and the prototype, right? And early
Hmm.
on in the film, they discover a prototype of Data made by the same creator that has been discovered, reprogrammed, and like hijacked in a way by um, Neo Picard,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
basically uh, infiltrate the Enterprise, sabotage them, and bring Picard to him.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, yeah,
Mm.
you can be very critical about the situations of your birth. You have created the same thing in a way. Like you have taken what would have been a prototype of Data allowed to develop and learn as Data does, and you have used him as a tool of war, the same thing that has happened to you, right?
Hmm.
He has that storyline a bit where I'm blanking on the name at the moment. Let me look up his name while we can cut some of this out while
Hmm.
Tom
uh
Hardy's character's name, or
yeah, Tom Hardy, Nemesis. I'm blanking on his name.
It's strange.
I'm
Um
fine to call him Neo Picard for the purpose
Neo
of this.
Picard.
Shinzon. There we go. Shinzon.
What is it?
Shinzon.
Shinzon. Okay.
Shinzon. Yeah.
Shinzon.
I'm not too embarrassed. We all forgot that. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it
yeah.
is what it is. There's so many like the sci-fi name. If
Yeah.
there's not a Z in there, it doesn't work. Um,
Yeah.
so you've got I'm trying to find my where I was. Anyway, uh, lost the train of
The
thought. Oh well.
relationship that he has with himself, or like that he does that same thing to Data's
Yeah, okay, yeah. So
mechanic one.
Yeah.
Shinzon
Yeah.
does have a like rejection of his uh allotted role in life to a certain extent, right? He basically he does a coup against the Romulans. The Romulans made him like okay, let me explain for the listeners. The
Hmm.
Romulans
Yeah.
captured Picard, stole his DNA, made a clone, had a whole plan to send him in, replace him. He ages up faster to a certain point,
Oh, yeah.
find Picard, kill him, steal his DNA to like complete him in a sense, and then live out the rest of his life as a sleeper agent, basically, or to like destabilize the Federation, whatever. They scrap that plan, send him to a nearby moon with the Remans, and say, well, this is a failed thing. We're not just going to kill him. We might as well put him to work. Throw him in a work camp. They stage a revolt, a rebellion, get some of the Romulans on their side, like basically the Romulan like CIA or intelligence agency, kill the entire government who was like, we don't want to go to war with the Federation anymore. That was a stupid idea. Kill the government, and then are like, okay, cool, we're gonna go kill Picard. So he has a serious, struggle of like, well, I was created to do this thing, this singular thing. And while he's vocally very critical about it, talking to when he has like dinner with Picard or has some monologues with Picard of like, maybe if you grew up in the mines of Remus and didn't see the light of day for 17 years, you would feel differently too, right? Like maybe if you lived a life of slavery, then you would also be this bitter and violent, right? But then he wholeheartedly like embraces it because he has this like sense that he is without purpose, right? Like he was created to do one thing and he cannot escape that, right? So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy when he takes the Data prototype, who I also am blanking on his name. Uh Data prototype.
B4.
Before.
Before, yes, of course, yeah. A
I
little on the
didn't
nose
remember
there.
that.
On the fucking
Um,
nose, yeah.
Yeah. But he just makes B4 into basically himself, right? Um, Data has a, Picard can look at Shinzon in a like speculative manner, basically maybe be a little bit more in touch with himself and realize that. And Picard also struggles with the like, you know, in the series, like when he is assimilated into the Borg briefly, like he's got a lot of trauma over that. He struggles with a lot of like, man, I am capable of some pretty heinous shit, but he wasn't doing that. Basically, the Borg made him purely machine, purely like without emotion, without any without any like morality or empathy or anything like that. Stripped him of his humanity and just made him a machine for war. Shinzon is a real person. Shinzon is alive. Shinzon has emotions. Shinzon has clearly, as in showcased, like desires and dreams of like exploring the stars because he and Picard have that connection of like you always wanted to see more out there. Shinzon is capable of murder. Shinzon is capable of sexual violence. Shinzon is capable of a lot of this shit that Picard has to look at and be like, okay, that's there. That's in me. Maybe it's not something I would do in this life, but differently, yeah. And he's got a lot of like, empathy towards that because Shinzon is not only like, a fellow living creature, he's literally him. He's looking in the mirror. Data with B4 is has a sense of like, he is trying to teach B4 what it means to be human. Because Data wants to understand what it meant to be human, and Picard has a like commentary towards the end of the film when he's talking with B4. Um, Data dies at the end, saving Picard and the rest of the crew. And I think Star Trek fans don't like this movie because Data dies.
That's a good point.
But
Yeah.
Data basically like sacrifices himself in the ultimate act of like, I am taking agency in my life. I am a living thing. I am going to do something that is universally good and the most human act I could possibly do of sacrificing myself to save those I love. Picard's talking with B4, and I just got goosebumps. Picard's talking to B4 and says, Data wanted to learn what it meant to be human, and in doing so, he taught us more than he learned himself, or something along those lines, right? He taught us more about ourselves than he learned about us, or something like that. So you've got Data trying to teach an earlier version of him, someone who's only been like programmed for sabotage, basically, who doesn't have the like cognitive abilities that he does. Like they say that his like programming and his like neural pathways aren't as advanced, so he just can't understand as much as Data is capable of. But Data doesn't stop trying. Data's like, I'm like, here are those people closest to me. Here are the things I learned. Like I can do with you what I failed to do with my brother, who's another character in the next gen, who's basically just evil Data. Um, and you have kind of like a like fatherly dynamic, which is there in Picard and Shinzon, because Picard's like, I know what you're feeling. You could do more. Like, you don't have to do this. And they just play off each other really fucking well. Like, I do wish you had a little bit more of the extended cast in the movie. But Data and Picard are people's favorites for a reason. And I do really like how they just stuck the two of them front and center and just let them carry.
Yeah.
Because it's phenomenal. I don't think, like I said, I don't think Nemesis does anything out of the ordinary in terms of like theming. I don't think it does anything groundbreaking or anything to be like, this is the greatest thing ever. I just think it's the best 8 out of 10 Star Trek film that I could watch. And as I'm looking at reviews and seeing that it's got like 38% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 6.4
Yeah.
on IMDb. I'm like,
Right.
these are all just salty ass Gen Xers who don't like that Data died. That's it.
The 38% was pretty shocking. I was like, it's not.
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes and I have beef anyway, but like weird. I'm
Yes.
just like, that is not. I don't know. Even critically, it seemed better than that. So I was pretty
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah. I really thank you for all of that. I really appreciate everything you said. I always want to kind of add on to that a little bit. Something I think is so cool about Star Trek in general, but what is so great about Picard and Patrick Stewart's performance as well, there's always the dialogue throughout the whole show about wanting to explore the galaxy and to find new worlds. And that's very true. He is also, and I'm glad they really addressed this, he is learning so much about humanity throughout the entire series by teaching Data about humanity. There's so many episodes that involve him teaching Data a certain Shakespearean monologue, and they talk it through what it means, you know. And there's like they talk about paintings together, they talk about music, and so does everyone else. Like they're teaching Data how to play poker, and I think I love that at the end of the day, even though Picard has seen so many amazing sites no one else has, he still is in love with humanity and still thinks humanity is so fucking cool. And I love that.
This is a very like Picard is the father that Data never had. Like they do run into his creator at some point, and it's a letdown basically. Like he just doesn't really care what Data wants with his life, and Picard's like, you can choose, like you can do what you want. This is your life. And he really like looks up to him as like a sage figure. So to have like Data sacrifice himself to save those he loves, and more importantly, like his father, in a like, you know, cool, I'm doing this. It's a very like I don't not Norse. There's like I know like Irish tragedy or like Celtic tragedy, and also, but like, you know, more Northern Europe than compared to like Greek. It's like the father's not dying; it's the son, right? And the father lives on with the loss of his son, which I didn't I don't think appreciate the first time watching it. Yeah, and then you know you have like what's left, I guess, at the end. Like Picard has lost like one of the closest friends that he never thought he had. And you've got B4, and it's like, cool. Maybe not a moment of like, let's start again, because B4 will never be Data. I don't think Picard is the type of character to like just replace someone like that. But like, you know, to honor him, he's like, you'll learn one day. Like he knows that B4 has like just mechanically, physically isn't capable of the same things that Data is, but you know, he's like, he knows that Data was able to accomplish so much that at first in the series he didn't think he was going to be able to. I think I may be misremembering this, but I don't think Picard was. I think he was like a little critical of Data at the beginning. So now he knows, like, look, I can be proven wrong. Like B4 can be capable of everything that Data was capable of. Or you know, he can be capable of surprising me in ways that I would not expect. Yeah, it's good shit.
There's a lot going on.
Not to be another man monologue here for a second, but I think that there's an old like original series episode of Star Trek that is like Captain Kirk has an accident in I forget what they call it, elevators, the lifts. Is that what it is? No, it was a transporter accident. And so somehow he's split into two people. And it's a very classic 60s dumb of like one of him is purely good and the other one is purely bad.
Yeah.
You know? And that's kind of how a lot of like duplicate stories would be in sci-fi for a long time. So I think this is it's a much better one. It's a much more nuanced, much more intelligent of you know, Picard does understand why Tom Hardy, because I can't remember his character's name, does what he does. And does recognize it's a much more opponent, oh, that is inside of me. I would have probably fought the same thing. So I think everything you're saying about it, the critics are wrong is true. And I think a lot of critics were just kind of mad about Data died, I didn't see enough LaForge, I didn't see enough of Worf, etc. And you kind of, if you're looking for those things, you do miss there's some really poignant things happening both in the Data relationship with Picard and Picard himself relationship. That is, I will also say across the board better than any deeper relationship in a Star Wars movie. So I think
Yeah,
pretty easily.
I think like I don't think the like criticisms of Nemesis are exactly wrong. I think that it does it is guilty of being a little bit more action movie oriented than Star
Sure.
Trek like would be normally. You are missing, like I said, I do wish we had seen like more of the main cast, but I think the people that think this movie is like, you know, a failure are really missing the forest for the trees. Like there's a lot of good shit right there in front of you. Like we just talked for an hour about
Right.
the two biggest characters in next gen, like the two like
Yeah.
most central characters in next gen, and really the culmination of their storylines together and independently. This builds off of all of Picard's guilt that he feels throughout his life, you know, being assimilated into the Borg, maybe, you know, like failures that he's had as a captain, choices that he's made that has cost people's lives. You have
Yeah.
Data like taking Data becoming a full like person in a certain light, if you want to see it that way. And like choosing to, you know, save everyone that he loves. Yeah, and like and I do kind of like the actiony bits a little bit because like okay, what's the name of the ship that Shinzon has?
That's a cool ship.
Shin-
Sorry, while you're
Dude,
looking
that
up, I have to
ship
say,
is sweet. The Scimitar. That's the
the
coolest
Scimitar.
fucking ship I have seen in Star Trek. That thing is
It's a
rad.
cool ship.
Yes,
Good.
yes, it is a massive like
I was gonna say it's
gun
huge.
platform basically,
Yeah.
but like aesthetically, design wise, that
Mhm.
thing is intimidating. I love it.
Right.
It's so nasty.
It matches
I
their costuming as well. I love
right.
that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that all felt very uniform. That all felt like very everything works together with the different aliens. I thought that was great. But like even just like
Mhm.
Picard and Data just driving really fast through the desert while he's laughing. It's like
Oh, it's
that's very
great.
much a
Yes.
I'm old. I know I shouldn't be going this fast. That's great. I love that. Now that's not a thing that'd be in an episode, but it also works.
Yeah, it's like
Mhm.
Yeah.
Picard's just fucking goofing off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He like that's what we were
Exactly.
talking about earlier. Like he's not
Right.
like Picard is not just this stone cold deadpan, let me give you a
Right.
soliloquy like character. He wants to fucking drive fast in dune buggies while fucking Worf shooting a cannon out the back, right?
Mhm.
Right. Which also this
Yeah.
has got to be the most people Worf kills in like an episode or a movie. Like
Oh
it's so
yeah.
often the thing of Worf's is their like really strong Klingon warrior who is easily overtaken for narrative reasons. So seeing Worf actually
Yeah.
kill like dozens of people was really fun. And
Yeah,
that's
there's a notable scene that everyone who's watched Next Gen knows. Well, like basically a barrel falls on him, and it's supposed to be like full of this like you know big compound, but in filming you can tell that it's just an empty thing of plastic that just kind of like
yeah.
bounces off him, and so it's like cool. Worf's supposed to be, you know, the bad guy is strong because they can beat
Mhm.
Worf, but Worf loses to
Right.
everybody, including a barrel.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
Megan, what tell us more about your kind of experience here? Because obviously we're in our Star Trek nerds.
I
What
love
kind of
to hear you guys talk about it. But
okay,
well,
thank
it
you.
also my little like side note hot take was that
Sure.
from what I could pick up on was just also like how there's really in like sci-fi it's almost like there's no new not no new ideas, but like everything is so influential on each other, and like
Sure.
in the
Yeah.
planet that we were just talking about where they're riding the RV or whatever, they have that
Mm.
the filter on the planet that kind of like that yellowish tint or whatever
Oh
going through the whole
yes,
scene,
yes.
and I was like, that's
That's
Dune
like the
Part
code for now.
Two.
You're in Mexico or you're in Dune.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to remember what that
But
term is
like
called, but like it's yeah,
I know, literally
you're
such a
exactly right, Megan.
small
Yeah.
and such a small little, film trait, but like that's just to show like
Yeah.
these things are so like influential on each other, and not to say that there were no new ideas, that's a little like harsh, I guess, um but yeah, there was a lot of like little things like that too, where even I loved like the designs of the interiors of the ships, and I thought that that played a lot into it was kind of an element of again, like sophistication, I guess was the only way I could say it, or like these people were very much so like a high level, like if they were akin to like being America or whatever, like that, it was like a high
Mm.
level of like American like in enterprise internship and stuff like that. So I
Ooh,
thought that
Enterprise is
was
a
like an
sweet ship.
interesting,
Great
yeah,
shit.
like an
Yeah.
interesting aspect of it as well, where I thought it was like which they were kind of like itching the surface on that, again with the nature versus nurture of Picard versus Neo Picard, as we've established, um, is like I almost thought there was an element in him of maybe like guilt or just recognition of how, he's had luck also to get to where
Absolutely.
he is in this spot, and there
Yeah.
are these tyrannical crazy places like going on that he could easily have been a part of. And so I think that I liked the scene of him, the hologram of Neo Picard and him talking and like just kind of like negotiating, I guess, and he's
Yeah.
very much so like trying to convince this person, but it was a like just a nice touch of desperation that you could tell that he's trying to like talk to himself, like his past self.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
A,
there that all of that was great. Really good little moments
Yeah.
there.
a lot of what I think is there is Picard knowing that he can't get Shinzon to experience everything he's experienced, right? Shinzon has
Yes.
only known pain. Shinzon has like
Mm-hmm.
only known like being made to die and made for war.
Mm-hmm.
Picard has been tortured in a like a what was it? Cardassian like Guantanamo Bay
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm.
Like
Okay.
he has
Yeah.
been tortured, he has been assimilated into the Borg like we said. He has been killed. He has gone through a basically an entire life in a different world in a like in a mindscape dream basically.
Mm.
He lived out his whole
Mhm.
life. Mentally this dude's like 200 years old at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like he has experienced lifetimes of a lot of suffering, a great deal. And Shinzon can't see that, right? Shinzon
Mm.
can only see what the rest of Starfleet sees as this,
Mm.
you know, glorious hero to
Ah.
humanity,
Yeah. Yeah.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I will never have what you have. And Picard is trying to, get him to understand, like, no, dude, I get it. I know, I don't know exactly what you've been through, but I've been through a lot of this. You can overcome it.
Mm.
And Shinzon just can't. He just can't, like,
Yeah.
escape his fatalist worldview.
Oh, that's great
Right.
context.
Megan, I know you haven't seen Return of the Jedi. Maybe don't need to, but the last original Star Wars trilogy does have
Mm-hmm.
Luke confronting his father, Darth Vader, and like having I
Yeah.
know there's still good type of conversation. And the way it's written and the way it works by Star Wars, it's almost as if Luke is saying there is a quantifiable 0.5% good still in you that he's
Mm-hmm.
referring to, because
Yeah.
it's all such mechanical dialogue, and then
Really.
he basically was able to activate that and Vader comes out. And I'm being a little condescending here, but it's not good writing, and it's like
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
very plain kind of fantasy rules type of dialogue. Whereas like it didn't occur to me until we started doing this how this ending is literally the opposite of that. Of it is like you said, the father outliving the son,
Yeah.
but with Data, but
Mm-hmm.
also with
Well,
the son
Shinzon.
is the evil one with
Yeah.
Tom Hardy, and the conversation's just. I think especially because I watched this right after having seen Star Wars, which I still like the original a lot, but it's like, yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
dialogue, like the actual conversations they're having are so much more interesting.
Yes.
We talked about how
Mm-hmm.
political it was, and I mean that in the literal terms of what it's conveying, the politics of it, but also in the sense of politics are an important part of this movie and of Star Trek. There's a lot more ambassadors and negotiations and political intrigue and spies and stuff that is, to me, like it's fun. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
It's
part is
also
cool.
like, Star Wars is, not to cut you off, Seth, but it's like
No, go
Star
ahead.
Wars has like a very distinct, these are good and these are bad, right?
Yes.
Star Trek, at
Right.
least this film and a lot of the other ones that deal with this subject matter, it's like, what makes a bad person, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
what makes a would-be good person into a bad person, right?
Mhm.
Like, how do governments just completely decide to write off life,
Right.
like write people off as like tools? How does like the machine of war just churn through people that otherwise could be huge great scientists, like like
Right.
explorers and incredible, like accomplish incredible things for not only themselves but those around
Yeah.
them. Like, what does make someone into a monster? um yeah.
I
Yeah.
had the feeling that Star Trek is like not as concerned with being digestible to like every but well,
Yeah.
maybe not even that, but
Yeah.
like, Star Wars is very much like it was meant to be a popcorn flick, and that's fine. That's great. But I think Star Trek, it does have that different feel, like just
Yeah.
different like tone even about it
I
that
think
is
you're
very distinct.
yeah, it's definitely, it can be intimidating to get into Star Trek, but I think it usually,
Yeah.
if you're like I got into it just like as a kid changing channels, and so
Yeah.
I was not watching it in order. I would just kind of catch it when I could, and doing that enough times, they're like, okay, I know who my guys are now. I know what's happening. But there is also like every episode, every movie has entire planet race you've never heard of is really important now. Technology that's never
Yeah.
come up before. So, um,
it's a very episodical, like,
yeah,
franchise, like
Yes.
yes,
the very loose continuing plot.
Yeah.
But everyone's just, yeah, like Seth said, every episode is going to be different from the last. You will have returning characters for like a greater story arc, but
yeah,
every single one's going to be like wildly different. It's the monster of the week, but it's the
Uh-huh.
alien tech mistake of the week.
right,
Okay.
right. So much happens in engineering in Star Trek, but no, you're definitely right because it is dense. Like even though there's like new thing of the week, and you're gonna hear a lot of terminology that's overwhelming at first, but you don't really like. I think you basically just walk into knowing like I don't need to know what that means. I just need to know they said this happened and then X happened,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how the dialogue's gonna be. Like you're here a scientific thing, and you're gonna see what that means really quick, so you're not expected to necessarily know what it means. So, it's intimidating, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty fun to be a part. Also, like, sorry, going back to how black and white Star Wars is versus this, like Romulan, the whole people, some are usually they're always this intimidating, threatening. They're across the board better than humans. They're stronger, they're smarter, etc. But there's Romulans in Starfleet. There's Romulans like in the Federation, and sometimes the whole like kind of planet is helping Earth, and so
They're an evil Roman Empire in space.
yeah, exactly. But that occasionally are on the right side of a war or something and are helpful. So like everyone has a lot more nuance than it's the Empire, it's the rebels, it's the light side, it's the dark side. So yeah. Well, I guess
and that's not to bash on Star
I
Wars
know.
audience.
Right, I know.
I fucking love Star Wars to death. I know more about it than I do Star Trek. I think like Star Trek sometimes does take itself a little too seriously, which is a little hard for people to get into.
Yeah, that's fair.
It also is like a comedic mess sometimes, where it's just like
Yeah.
this is the most unserious thing I've ever seen in my life. But yeah.
Well, I think we should go to closing thoughts and suggestions, if that's all right.
Sure.
I'm ready.
Riley, you want to close this out with, or you want to start the closing out?
Sure. I was talking to people, kind of like telling them that I was going to be doing the episode, and I was explaining like our dynamic when I'm on. It's like, yeah, it's just me shouting maniacally and opinionated Seth until Seth like giggles like a maniac and just like eggs me on, and Megan sits there and tolerates it with like increasing concern.
Slight worry. No.
All
Yeah.
these checks will be had on both of us. Yeah.
Yeah. This one
Um,
was like, dare I say, the least amount of ranting, I would say. So
yeah, I mean, yeah.
Fourth time's the charm.
Just a quick 10 minutes at the beginning.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's understandable.
But yeah, so like for those of you who like want to watch it is unfortunate that I do think you need a lot of context to like get everything out of this movie. But if you haven't seen Star Trek or you're interested in watching Star Trek, watch Nemesis. Like
Hmm.
it's a very digestible, fun. You don't need to know everything to really get the better part of it.
Hmm.
But it's a fun movie. It all kind of makes sense. It's visually gorgeous. The characters are compelling. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. And I don't know, Megan, do you like, did this movie make you want to go watch more?
It did,
If
yeah,
not,
it
that's
did.
fine. But I'm
No,
curious.
it did. I'll say that in my pitch too. But like, if these two guys haven't
Yeah.
convinced you guys to watch it, like, I think that I do think it stands alone. Like, especially if you want a story about like a literally a moral plot line about kind of a complicated moral plot line like we've talked about, it stands alone in that regard. So kind of there you go.
Great, amazing. So take
Yeah.
that, go
Right.
watch Next Gen,
Yeah.
then watch DS9. You'll get there, I promise.
Right.
And for those of you who think that First Contact is a better film, wake up.
Mm.
Get your fucking head on straight. Come on.
Riley, I didn't know what I was in for when I even after watching this movie, I was like, I'm liking this, but like, what is Riley gonna say?
Yeah.
Was what I kind of kept asking my wife, who's also enjoying it, being like, I kind of don't get it, but this is like, yeah, it was very fun. I'm glad we watched it, and it is definitely
Yeah.
better than First Contact, which,
Oh, good.
as Riley's told me in several times off of this chat, that's the most important thing to convey is that it's better than First
It's
Contact.
better.
First Contact is like only a Star Trek movie in the sense that it has a Star Trek character in it.
Mm.
That's
I
it.
was I was worried that I came off too strong in preferring Lynch's Dune to the new Dunes when we did that episode, but I was not at your level with the point being one movie is better than the other, and it's a movie we're not even talking about.
My
um,
brother-in-law said I was crazy and I should not say that around his family. And
Mm.
I'm like, do you disagree? He's like, no, I don't disagree. I'm just saying you'll start fights with that. I'm like,
these
bring it
are
on, bitch.
these are nerd fighting words, and I love it. I'm
Yeah.
so here
Yes.
for it. This is what's gonna make us blow up. Um,
Yeah.
Hmm.
sorry, Megan, your closing thoughts, then I'll close this out.
Sure, I kind of said it. I mean, I'm glad you guys are dying on this hill. I will try to die on this hill with you and get into it. And it like I said, it stands. I think that this movie stands alone, and it at least it sounds like I was able to pick up on like the very general and like um uh fleshed out ideas that Star Trek kind of provides to its the whole thing, the whole situation, and I found that really interesting, especially just like in talking about something that's so iconically part of the early 2000s, like um space colonization
Sure.
movies that we like to talk about. So I think that it does stand on its own in that regard, and I will watch more and die on the hill with you guys. I sure hope so.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So glad to hear that, and I'll just add on like we didn't talk about it enough yet. Tom Hardy is really great in this, and
He
so if
is.
nothing else, that's an easy like watch the one with Tom Hardy. Then the other ones have him in it, and he's very young in here, and
Yeah. It's
um
like I don't know if it's like one of his earliest like
I think it's like his
standout
first four or
roles.
five. So on that note, he around this time, maybe shortly afterwards, he was battling a cocaine addiction for years and
Oh
did
wow.
successfully battle it and has been clean for a long time. So you do see this kind of like if you look at his filmography, these kind of peaks, and then like he never stops
Mm.
working, but doesn't have as meaty of a role with like a big budget thing for a while. But like he got sober. I think he largely attributes it to doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which he still competes in apparently.
Wow.
So if anyone's
Yeah.
struggling, check that out. Kind of off the beaten
Nice.
pathway, but also just be inspired. He's still acting, is doing great work, and I think we've talked about before. I even love him just having the campy time of his life as Venom. Like that's a good time to me. As much as those movies
He's
largely don't work, these movies basically being body horror romances with the same person is great to me. I love that. But
yeah, it's like, are they gonna kiss?
exactly. And it's in
Campy
San
to a
Francisco.
fault. Yeah.
Yes.
This is I just looked it up. This is like one of his earliest like film
Okay.
accreditations.
Yeah.
Like he started in like late 90s, like 98 or stuff. He was on Band of Brothers and then Black Hawk Down in 2001 and then this in 2002. So if you want to see like
Cool.
early Tom Hardy, like
Yeah.
really show you what he's capable of from the get-go, like
And
give it a
is
shot.
holding his own against Picard, against Patrick Stewart in a
Yeah,
scene.
against Patrick
Can you
Stewart,
imagine how intimidating right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
He's
I feel
not
like
offbeat.
Patrick Stewart can easily like has that effect on people where like
Yeah.
he just overshadows them. Like they almost
Oh,
like
yeah.
back off to give him the spotlight. And Tom
Mhm.
Hardy's like, well, I'm playing the same person, so I'm gonna meet you here.
Right.
And then just like
Yeah.
shout at you
And
all
be
the
just
time.
as crazy.
Yeah,
Or like
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's great.
just as in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Slightly more fey. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah, so I highly recommend this. I will also just kind of say, like, discussing Star Trek in general, you may not think you miss old TV, but you do. And I'm just saying that, like, hey, there's such an idea we live in the golden age of television that, like, it's really comforting to go back and watch old school TV where it's like 45 minutes and you have 30, 20 or 30 episodes a season. There's a lot of things people complain about, like, oh, the stories were more random. Like, you also have a lot of much more subtle character development in these areas. Like you have characters on Star Trek, Next Gen, and Deep Space Nine that like go places in a much longer period of time, places you don't think they're going to go to because the writers have the time to do that. And it's just a completely different format that I think you'll find familiar and fun. So if you've only been watching whatever's on Max, etc., for the last 5 years, just try watching A's show from that era. We definitely recommend any of the Star
Do you
Treks.
miss
But
practical effects?
yeah,
Do you miss
right?
costumes and everything's not
right.
just a like CG nightmare to look at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will see the same park in LA 15 times in one season as different planets.
Oh
And that's
yeah.
part of the fun. Over all the shows, like from the original to even the current ones. But
don't mind that.
But it rules. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I highly recommend this, folks. I didn't know what to expect because I was avoiding this and I'm really upset myself for avoiding it. But I also think there's no better way than to have the absolute passion of Riley inspire me to watch this.
The dancing monkey to your like NPR soft spokenness.
I'll take it. Well, folks, let's go on to recommendations. Riley's our guest. Did you mind starting us off here?
Sure. I had completely blanked on this, but this is a pretty easy recommend. I don't think it should come as any surprise. Like we're already talking about it. Watch Next Gen. Next Gen is like the perfect intro to Star Trek. You get to see Gene Roddenberry's kind of like early 80s speculation on like where can we go, right? And really writing ahead of his time for a lot of this stuff. Like I said, there's a full episode on like trans rights that they wanted to go even further. I'll give you kind of like a brief synopsis. You got a whole race that's like gender neutral, and one of the characters that's like, I think I want to be a woman, and falls in love with Riker, what like the Picard's like second in command. And then there's a whole thing on there. And originally they wanted that character to go, I want to be a man, and they fall in love. But like they're trying like super hard to like really push boundaries, really like put a mirror in front of America and like, kind of laugh at and point at the lunacy that is a lot of part of our culture. They do have some pitfalls. I'm gonna say that right away. Sometimes like accidentally the most offensive thing that you've seen on TV, but they make up for it. But yeah, watch Next Gen, especially if you just watched Nemesis. Watch Nemesis, go watch Next Gen, watch Nemesis again, so you can really appreciate like everything that comes out of this film. Watch Star Trek, period. Done.
Cool. Megan, do you have a rec for us?
I will. I'm gonna go like semi-rogue, a little bit rogue here, because I was gonna recommend Dune 2.
Or something?
No, nothing like that.
Okay.
But well, so I was gonna recommend Dune 2, but I was like, that's so low hanging fruit here for me. So I'm gonna really try and like give a general actually a TV show recommendation that we're watching right now, of a sci-fi recommendation about a show called Dark, and it's like a time travel
Oh yeah, the German
show.
show.
It is, yes. And so
Nice.
we're getting our way through that. It's funny that I was listening to you, Seth, about this is a Netflix factory churn out-esque
Yeah.
show, but listen, guys, listen, like it's not as like the storyline for time travel itself is so insanely complex and like happens to
Hmm.
kids like high school age kids, so it's a lot of them just being like, what the fuck is happening? And like that's very, in terms of like their reaction to everything, I think it's very valid, and like their families get involved and it becomes a whole Ouroboros situation. So if you're into like
Yeah.
that, like an extremely complicated time travel plot line, I've been really enjoying it, and I think that it is it's a fun sci-fi aspect and very like as trying to be as like serious as possible about time travel. So
Yeah.
I find it really interesting. I like that show a lot.
I never finished the third season on that show. I need to get back to it. I'm glad you reminded me of that
Okay.
one, Megan. But yeah, that's a great show. So I'll second that recommendation. I will say too, kind of a weird Netflix disclaimer here. If it's a foreign show on
Hmm.
Netflix, they know it's called with Netflix version, then that show wasn't made by Netflix. Netflix
That
bought it,
yeah.
so they
Hmm.
tend to be better. So they tend to like have their own independent production. Then it's like I think that show was on German TV, then it was just distributed here. So
I bet. Hmm.
yeah, that happens fairly often, and that's why there's sometimes these quality discrepancies, for lack of
Yeah.
a
Kind
better
of
term.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
Black Mirror.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
Black Mirror and like
starts off
Peaky
great,
Blinders.
bought by
Yeah,
Netflix, kind of
yeah.
turns into swill.
Yep.
Someone described Black Mirror as what if phone, but too much. I think that's kind of how every episode is. Just
What if
they have a
phone
fun
bad?
Star Trek episode. Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Their Star Trek parody is Jesse Plemons, right? Yeah, that's a good
oh,
one.
I didn't know that.
Um, So as I've said previously on the podcast, my favorite Star Trek is Deep Space Nine. As Riley pointed, like there's they push the trans stuff even further. There's a recurring
Nice.
there's a main cast member who is considered a trans icon, Jadzia Dax, like has been in magazines as that, who is the trail of this kind of race. Unless you're talking about a completely different thing, Riley, because I haven't seen that episode of Next Gen. But you also
Yeah.
so you're about to say something.
No, it is a different race. I had completely,
Incredible. Okay.
I was so TNG focused. I had
Yeah.
completely missed DS9. I'm watching it right now. I am like most of the way through. It's phenomenal. It
Yeah.
does a lot of like stuff that Next Gen doesn't. I'd say like the strengths of Next Gen are DS9's weaknesses, and DS9 strengths are Next Gen's weaknesses. So the two
Yeah.
pair very, very well. Yeah.
It has it started with a lot of the same writers who, so we're getting a little Star Trek lore here. Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, had a really strange rule for Next Gen, when it came out, which was that there couldn't really be inner conflict on the ship. Whereas like the original series, so many episodes was like Spock and Kirk and Bones fighting. And so all the writers who grew up watching and loving Star Trek were like, that's what the episodes are. And they still made like 8 seasons, and it's still great, but it is really unique in that like it's never like the boardroom means seatings, there's discussion, but there's never like someone's going behind Picard's back or vice versa or something like that. So all these writers were like unfettered when they did ES Space Nine because Roddenberry had died. And so he no longer had to adhere to this. And there's a lot of intense things that they include in there that they were just flat out not allowed to do, including when the main cast is a terrorist and is very openly a terrorist and has no regrets being a terrorist.
She's the
And
fucking best. Love
yes,
Kira.
she's the best. Yeah, and tries to kill the captain right away, Cisco. And
Yeah.
I think
Like, go.
they have a lot of great representation for like it's a great black single dad, which is not something that historically has been portrayed well on TV, especially not in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And they hinted a lot more, say, queerness than any of the other shows. It's still hinted, and the writers have expressed and should have leaned into it more. But yeah, it's a much darker show. And my last thing is people with PTSD, which I'm one of, but people with war PTSD, say with later episodes that kind of deal with that, do a really good job of it. So that's kind of coming up. But there's like an ongoing war for like the last like 2 or 3 seasons of that show, and it's just like happening. And then they have very silly episodes where the ship gets really small, so it keeps classic goofiness along with it.
Next Gen is like, whereas Next Gen is the like platonic ideal of a space crew, of a starship crew, right? DS9 is a bunch of freaks and outcasts and like social pariahs. It's really, really, really cool. And what's great is like the first episode of DS9, you have like the main cast of both shows kind of interacting as they're like passing the torch kind of thing, because Next Gen is coming to an end and DS9 is gonna like start and continue. And Benjamin Sisko is the commander on DS9. He is equal in Patrick Stewart's level of like overacting early in their respective like TV series, and he also fucking hates Picard. Because Picard killed his wife when he was aboard. So you have like it's super cool. I was not expecting that. And then just like show starts, here's Picard, someone you've been watching hundreds of hours of that you love. Here's your new guy, and he's like, "Get the fuck off my station, Picard. I hate your guts." It's like, whoa, okay, where are we going?
It was unexpected.
Yeah.
A real letting you know you're in for something different type episode.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, all right, that's our Star Trek talk, but are we already on to recommendations? I lost track of where we were, sorry. No, yeah, we are at recommendations, sorry. So that was my
on yours.
I will recommend a movie as well, sorry, a non-Star Trek related thing. I just saw Mickey 17. It's fantastic. The new Bong Joon-ho, I think is how you pronounce the director's name. My apologies, but the new Bong Joon-ho film who did Parasite and many other great movies. This is his first post-Parasite film. It is a sci-fi with Robert Pattinson in many forms, and the general quick premise is he foolishly signed up to be part of a program called Expendable, where they can reprint out his body and keep sending him to do incredibly deadly things. It's as politically aggressive as any movies by this director, which I love. It is not subtle. It's very anti-capitalist, and I'm really glad that I watched the trailer when the trailer came out, and I forgot everything other than Robert Pattinson was in it, which means I had the delight of, holy shit, Mark Ruffalo's in this, and Toni Collette, and Steven Yeun, and it's a great movie. It has a lot of fun casts, and we've talked about how fun it is to see any Marvel person doing their post-Marvel stuff, and Mark Ruffalo is especially, he's really crushing that with like Poor Things, and then this is being a completely different type of horrible person, and he's he's definitely he's definitely a Trump-like dumb politician, but there's also a lot of televangelist in there in his performance. That is great. That is also so up my, because that's what I grew up in. It's so up my alley to see somebody do and have fun. So see that in theaters. I think largely it's political nature and other just things. It is kind of being buried. It's not getting that wide of a release as it should. So it is playing near you. Try to see it. All right. Well, folks, that was the episode. We did it. You heard a lot about Star Trek, which means Riley has to come back on and talk about something Russian next time, probably.
I will see you in a year.
Yes, exactly. We've like teased like 3 episodes of you coming back on. I don't remember any of them are now. I'm pretty sure one of them Solaris. But
we started with Solaris and Stalker, and I was like, I watched both of them because we talked about that. We've talked about this. We've talked about Fury Road. Sorry to bother you. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I was just going through them as well.
Yeah, I feel like there was another one that you and I had talked about like over text or something, but I can't remember.
I think we were gonna want you to come back to the talk Furiosa, but I don't think you cared for Furiosa enough to want to come back on it. So
yeah. I mean, we can. Like, yeah, whatever.
Let's crank it out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right now, here, quick 15
You
minutes.
ever get- you guys anywhere to be?
Not really.
Oh my God. Well, I do. My apologies.
It'd be interesting. Yeah,
Um,
I'd love to talk about that.
yeah, I think we should do Furious as well. So, but folks, thanks for sticking around. Riley, always delight to have you on here. Thank
Yep.
you, and
Thanks.
Megan.
Thank you very much.
As always, thank you for indulging me, and
guys
thank you
are
for indulging Riley and I nerding out about something you knew even less than Star Wars.
You guys are the best. I appreciate people appreciating really hard what they love. So that's the
That's
best.
decompressing session.
Yes.
Necessary.
It's true.
It was awesome.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, guys.